Good day. My name is Samanin Jim. I'm here at the request of Venerable Som Phaeng from Wat Arun. Today in this Dharma talk we have two very special guests from the United States. They are my children. Here we have Sean Prince and Shannon Ann Prince. And they're here on a visit. So, good day.
Hello.
Hello.
Good day.
And it's good to see you again after how many years?
27.
It's been 27 years since we spoke.
30.
And 30.
Yes.
That's a very long time. I know that's true. In this first segment, I would like to talk about what it was like, well, in the early years. What is your memory of our lives together at that time? John?
Well, I don't have many. I was one. I do remember, seeing. I did discuss this in short with you over the internet when we were corresponding. That although the rest of the family may be under the impression that I was aware that you were my father, I kind of wasn't. I was off busy playing and doing my own things. And it never just was really brought up until later when I had questioned, why I was the only one with blonde hair in the family. And they said, oh, well, that guy that you think is funny that we see over at Grandmom and Granddad's house, well, he's your father. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I associated the two. So I kind of knew you as a funny friend of the family was my perception of it as a child. And then finally put the pieces together, later on.
And it was you, actually, that came across me on the internet.
It was.
And how did that happen?
I'd been hiking with a friend and talking about it, and since the social networking age has come to light and is progressing, I figured I've put myself out there for people to find in my past, and I figured I had a good feeling that this was one way I was going to be able to finally possibly find you out there, and it wasn't long, I guess.
How long was it that by the time you started looking until we stumbled across one another?
Well, I'd searched I guess we met with Tammy, and she gave us some keywords to search. Shannon and I pretty much started the search together.
And about how long
serious
ago was
search.
How long ago was that?
A year. I think
Yes.
it was about a year ago.
Yeah, year and a half we started thinking about
it. Then we met with
looking for
Tammy.
you. Right.
It was
right.
about
When
a
I
year
got it
ago.
started.
And I got some keywords from her as far as like Tambolian map and whatnot. And I searched that, found somebody looking for you, had some more keywords such as some of the books you were writing, the Roke Institute, things like that, and then stumbled upon the Tambolian map blog page signed Y at the bottom, and I said, well, hey, Dad.
That was pretty interesting, wasn't it?
It sure was. I wasn't sure if it was going to be you or not, and it certainly was. So
how long was it by the time you found that blog page and we exchanged emails?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
About how long was it when you first found that blog page until we exchanged emails?
It was immediate. I wrote immediately, and you answered, I think was within the next couple days. I do have to mention that my hiking buddy, we'd exchanged some conversation. I was talking to him about it, and he was actually the one who found your blog, and then he passed it on to me. So Bob gets all the credit for that.
Well,
that's
right. New information.
Yeah,
Isn't it interesting?
Yeah, I just thought of it.
And I remember stumbling across the Tambolian map in the same address that you did, and was surprised. And it was the first time I had even thought about looking at up those words. And I contacted Brian, and the whole process was maybe 4 days. By the time I decided to look, until we said hello. And that's pretty remarkable after 30 years.
Sure.
Thank you very much. That's new information. And Shannon Ann, what was your early remembrances of our time together?
I had very nice memories since it was 7. I was 7 when you went on your way. Happy memories. You were fun. You played with us. It was a fun time. We got to live in some fun places.
What do you remember about Sonoma and the creek and the house trailer and Grandma?
Oh, it was great. Some of the best times of my life. It was a free place to be a kid. We could wander up and down the creek and nobody had to worry, and Grandma was a great grandma. It was a comfortable place to be.
It was out in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And no fences and
Right.
lots of places to go. I think
Right.
that matters. You were at the Russian River, so it was similar, wasn't it? Or was it?
It was very similar.
Mhm.
Very. There's a lot more freedom during the time that we grew up. I believe things have changed now. I am appreciative of the time that we grew up. Parents didn't worry about their kids quite so much, and we were fine. We got to play a lot, and being on water was always a nice thing. The creek,
Mm-hmm.
the Russian River.
And during the time where we were separated out, did people ask you about your father and where he might be, or did you have some feelings about that or concerns?
People asked. You know what? We were just kids. We didn't think about stuff too much.
Yes, I remember our time together early on, and I normally explained to people as I played with my children until they got tired, which may be the truth or may be the case, certainly in your case. But during the absence period, people would ask me from time to time if I'm keeping in touch with my children, and all that whole 30 years I was really unable to make that connection or to find out where you had gone. And I didn't know anyone that knew where you were.
Grandma, after she
Well,
passed.
Well, actually, she didn't know where you were. Once she went to Hawaii, she kind of lost track of you, I think. Or we didn't talk much about that.
Mm-hmm.
But Grandma was great. I called her Grandma. She once asked me why I called her Grandma since she was my mother. And I said, well, you're a grandma, so you should be called a grandma.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, well, it's true.
And now that we're talking about it, and I, tend to not think about things a lot until the opportunity comes, and it seemed that you had a journey to go on, that you created us, and then you had your journey.
Well, I certainly was encouraged to go on the journey at one time by your mother, whom I liked very much and honored and respected. Probably still do if we get together or if we talk again. And that's what I did do. I did wander off into a spiritual environment and spent 40 years in that. It was not necessarily religious pilgrimage. It was more of a spiritual quest for what that might mean. And so now you get to read the books about that. It's probably a good time. Now, once we got together on the internet, it was only, 2 months ago? 3 months ago?
A little bit
6.
longer than that, yeah.
I'd
Was
say
it that
about
long ago?
6.
Probably, yeah, about 6
We
months.
wouldn't pack up and come to Thailand in only 2 months.
So
Yeah,
6 months.
it
It's
took a
been
while.
6 months.
Yeah, we've been corresponding for a while now.
And was there a particular reason why you came to Thailand or wanted to come to Thailand?
An opportunity for an adventure, a journey in more ways than, of course, I knew it was going to be a journey on an emotional and I suppose a spiritual level coming to see you, but it was also a journey to see a new place. And I found that very interesting, and I'm pleased. I'm very pleased with the experience.
And can you tell us your motivation for coming?
Well, we I was going to come to see anxious to see what you've been up to, and Shannon also is getting married, so she wanted to kind of hash out, see what was going on over here, and certainly wants you to be at the wedding, and wanted to kind of figure that kind of out, because it is it's an interesting time. There's lots of things going on. There's lots of emotions and questions that we're slowly answering, and it's becoming it's a good journey, and some of it's difficult, some of it's easy, some of it's fun, some of it's wondrous, and it's going to be all. I guess that's the way life is with things like this. But it's Thailand is certainly a wonderful place that I'm enjoying quite a bit, and it's everything I'd hoped it was going to be. And I'm learning how to become more of an adventurer, and I jumped at the chance. I was happy to know that you were somewhere exotic and a place that I wanted to see. And you also posed the question, did people know what you were about as I was growing up, and asked questions? And my friends, it's funny because I had an idea what you were up to. I don't know how long. I was surprised to know that you've been a monk for how long now?
40 years.
Okay, 40 years, yeah. So I thought you had made some sort of commitment in 3 or 4 years ago. Okay, then right, 40 years. Okay, so yes, I knew what you were doing, and my friends were surprised, and some didn't, weren't sure they believed me or whatever, and they kind of would tease me about it sometimes in a fun way. But then when I told them, I guess some of them thought I was joking, because when I said to my friends recently that I'm going to Thailand, they're like, "Oh, to do what?" And I go, "To see my dad who's been a monk." And they're like, "Oh, you weren't kidding about that." Like, "Oh, you were serious?" So yeah, so that was a funny little anecdote.
Yes, well, there's not many children that can say that in America that can say their father is a monk in Thailand. You in fact may be it.
And Sean reminded me about another reason why I'm here, and what gave me the opportunity, since I am going to be sharing my life with someone. And I was talking to you about the wedding. I did want to meet you before you came to my wedding, not during my wedding meeting. So I wanted to meet you for the first time before.
Well, that's very nice. And I think that was a very good idea. Mm-hmm. Now, before you discovered where I was, for example, when I was gone, did other people ask you where your real father might have been doing, or might be doing, or what he did, or what you knew about me during that time? Do you remember any instances where that was a difficult thing or not?
I think the focus was on Jonathan, who adopted us, and that's basically where we concentrated our father energy. It wasn't until we pretty much found you that was the main, because we didn't know if we were ever going to see you again. So
until we became adults,
right? And
then it wouldn't be until I spoke of it, because when you're adults,
right,
the parents don't. I guess people aren't going to ask about your parents, unless we share that information.
Share it, right.
And it was always very interesting to my friends when I shared what I knew of what you were doing.
And what did you know?
I knew that you were following a path of Buddhism, and that you didn't have a traditional life. That you weren't living under a bridge, but you didn't have a 9-to-5 job and a home with a picket fence.
I mean, I didn't tell you about the time I was living under the bridge. Oh, that time.
But I felt, and people I shared with felt that you had an interesting life with what I knew. And I had a feeling when we started looking for you, since I work with the public, I felt one way of getting it out there would be to share our search. And so with some people I shared with, I had a feeling that you were in Thailand, just from information that I had gotten. Being a monk, a Buddhist, that wasn't surprising to know that you were in Thailand. And of course, interesting. And where am I going with this story?
No, that she brought up something
Yes.
where it was it was talked about a bit more.
Right, as adults.
As adults, if I felt like it was a conversation with this person, if it felt organic or whatever, and certainly people did find it, amusing and had questions. I couldn't really answer those questions. I just knew that, you were living a unconventional life, and that's interesting to people, especially in the West. They find it very interesting, and now I'm going to have some answers for them.
Did you find it interesting?
Of course, I found it interesting. Yes, I found it interesting. I had nothing. I didn't know anything about it, but I found it interesting.
Okay. And Jonathan, when Jonathan found out you were coming here, what was his response?
He was happy
Very
for us.
supportive. Yeah.
Very supportive.
I always liked Jonathan. I liked him from
wonderful
right away.
man.
He wanted us to give you a hug.
Oh, well, we'll have
Sean can do that.
We'll have to put that off for the time being.
He's a wonderful man, and we love him very much.
Well, I thought at the time when Jonathan was there that he would take care of the family. And I wouldn't have gone into a spiritual lifestyle choice if that wasn't the case.
Sure.
I would have never allowed the family to suffer in any way, and that wouldn't have been a Buddha way. And the things that they ask you initially, are you in debt and do you have responsibilities? And at the time, I felt that Jonathan had taken over the job and was actually quite interested in doing that. And it seemed that Christian was invested in that. You children really didn't have much of a choice, but it didn't look like you were going to have a lot of trouble with it. And from my point of view, when I chose this lifestyle choice, I took that into consideration in my choice. If that looked like it wasn't going to be the case, I never would have done this.
I feel okay with that answer. It's good. I'm okay. Well, the dynamics of a breakup and all that stuff. I mean, I was certainly too young to understand all of that, and I know how odd it may have felt to be. You had a choice. You could have said, "Well, no, I'm going to be a part of my kid's life," and that probably would have had happened. But I can understand your side of it, certainly, and I can understand how you would maybe feel uncomfortable. But I also, I guess one question I'd like to know is, were you in some sense relieved that you could pursue this lifestyle?
No, actually I wasn't. I would have never left Kristen on my own.
Okay.
Never entered my mind. When I was asked to leave, I wasn't surprised. And she would have had to have done it in that way. I never would have left on my own. And I never would have left you kids. It was too much fun. I mean, all you wanted to do was play.
Yeah.
And that's all I wanted to do.
Right. Yeah, but I totally. I mean, I've seen breakups, and I see how it must have been difficult for everybody, and you, and I for part of me was like, well, it seemed like I don't know what happened, but part of me was like, maybe it seemed easy for you to do that. For some reason, I'm getting that information and feeling, but I do understand that it must have been difficult for you as well, and I know that at that age, my mom being someone possibly that saw Jonathan as more security or something like that. I know there's more to the story and more human emotions at play.
Well, actually, I was told if you
yeah,
leave your
no, I
family
know.
and you leave your job, you're going to die an alcoholic in the gutter in 6 months.
Who told you that?
No, that was not...
The society telling
Society
you that?
telling you
Yes,
that, yeah.
it really is a huge black hole you look into after being in the family for 8 or 9 years and establishing it as a lifestyle choice, and then it's gone, and you look into a huge cavern of unknowns, and how could you leave your family? What are you going to do? You're going to be miserable and die and live in poverty and grief for the rest of your life. Truly, that was the conditions that were explained to me.
And lesser men, I'm sure, have ended up there.
Well, I actually didn't have all that choice.
Right.
And I was totally flabbergasted, and 2 months later I was in a Tibetan Buddhist monastery looking out a bay window over, in the hills of Berkeley, living with 60 really interesting, dramatic people in 1970 in the middle of everything. We were 5 blocks from insanity, chaos, and every changing idea in the universe. Like Berkeley in the 70s was the bindu of every idea that ever was thought up.
Sure.
And we were 5 blocks away and part of the oars in the water on that whole process. And a Tibetan Lama with a Egyptian wife and 2 children, and I lived in the basement under the stairs in a kind of a hot Harry Potter kind of an idea, but the stairs were the stairs to the temple room. And they would go clunk, 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 clunk in the morning before I was able to go into the temple myself. It was different, and I wasn't dead in the gutter and starving to death and no place to go, nothing to do. It was something that was completely unexpected and something that I didn't imagine happening after I left, because I thought I was going to wind up, miserable in grief and anguish. And it was about 5 years before I was able to have a close personal relationship with another person. And I just wasn't interested. And so I think it was 5 years before I actually turned the corner in some emotional way or personal way, saying that, well, okay, what's next? It looks like we're at the end of our session.
Okay.
I want to thank you very much for coming in today and sharing your experiences with your Buddhist father, whom you haven't seen for 30 years. And this is what, day 5?
I believe.
Something like
Day
that.
5
Day
or day
6 or
6?
6 or 6
So
or 7.
we're catching up.
Catching up.
I want to thank you, everyone, and thank Venerable Sun Phong for inviting us here today.